Well, have I got an update for you? In this video, I'm going to talk about the JavaScript error, the very, very simple JavaScript error that has almost put me out of business. And I would love to be saying that I'm speaking in past tense and that this is something that happened years ago. Unfortunately, this is something that's happening right now. And it was an error that came to my attention about 6 days ago, and it has taken me from then until now to get on top of it. And now I'm going to wrap the site back up and have it up again tomorrow. So that's 7 days that it has taken me to figure out what this fault was and to fix this fault. So I'll tell you what the fault was, and I'm quite happy to discuss all of this. And I do this for a couple of reasons. The reason, people will be thinking, well, why on earth are you airing your dirty underwear in public here? Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, this error that I have experienced is not being discussed anywhere. I've not seen anybody talking about this error, and I've spent, well, to give you an idea, last night I got up at 3:30 in the morning. I'm speaking to you now after 11 at night, the following day. The day before I had no sleep, literally none. Day before I had about 2 or 3 hours, day before no sleep. I've been working an average of about 22 hours per day solving this problem. And the reason, as I say, the reason why I want to discuss this is because I never want this to happen to anybody else ever. And I think you need to know about this stuff. And also, I think that one of the things I've learned since doing the podcasts and the YouTube thing and all of that is that the more authentic you are, then the more good things are attracted to you, you know, people and opportunities and all of that stuff. And somebody once said, that one of the big problems in this life is that nobody takes responsibility. And so this is an example, hopefully a rare example, of something that went badly wrong, and I am responsible, and I'm happy to put that out into the universe, And finally, even though this was a blunder from me, there's no bad intention. It's not as if I've done something malicious. It's not anything that put anybody's details at risk or anything. This was an entirely front-end error to do with a drop-down of all things. And it never compromised any data or anything. And, there's not any, there's not any danger to the client or me or anything like that, And finally, I'll just say this finally before I get off on the error. I remember a number of years ago, I was on a web hosting forum, and there was a host in the UK, a web host, who had been hacked. Now, I'd known this host, I'd been with this host since the mid-90s. Since 1996, I'd been using this hosting company, and they got hacked one time. I'll give you the name of the company, Namehog. They've been bought out since, and they've done very well. But in any event, they must have been about 2006 or something like that. They got hacked. Completely hacked, and it was a disaster. And they took about 3 or 4 days fixing that. They couldn't answer the phone. And I remember looking in one of the forums, and there were dozens and dozens of people saying, I'm leaving this company. And they were on the forum saying, we're getting out of here. This is a disgrace. Our sites have been hacked and the servers have been compromised. And, this is really, really bad. And what a shower of chancers these people are. And I remember I went on the forum, and I took a different perspective. I said, guys, you've got it all wrong. Rather than abandoning this company because they got hacked, I'm actually staying with this company because they've just spent, 4 days figuring out exactly how their servers get hacked, how to fix that, and how to prevent that from happening again. This was a very sophisticated hack, by the way. And I figured that experience is really, really valuable, you know? That's awesome. And I thought, that's the hosting company I want to go with, you know? It's kind of like the person whose home has been broken into. That's the house that will probably be secure, you know? And I remember I said that at the time on the forum, and the guys, they got back and they thanked me for standing up for them. And of course, they not only did they never get hacked again, they get bought out by a much bigger company, and everybody lived happily ever after. So keep that in mind as you hear this slightly embarrassing story. So here's what happened. I've been building a site for a company, and the site has got multiple drop downs on it. And you know the vibes, like you pick one and then it populates the other, you pick the other, it populates the next one without page refreshes. Now, being the trendy hipster that I've been trying to be lately, I basically threw a ton of pretty modern technologies at this site. So I used Materialize, which is a combination of CSS and some pretty intense JavaScript. And I also used some Angular JS with this site, along with, of course, PHP and MySQL, you know. But it had a lot going on, you know. And what I discovered, it got reported 6 days ago, that apparently somebody had phoned in and said, do you know your website's freezing, the homepage? And they hadn't had any inquiries at all, literally none. And then upon investigation, I discovered, to my horror, that the site was not working on a range of mobile devices, particularly some iPhones. Not even all, but some iPhones. Also, there was one desktop, definitely, where it was not working. And it was just a nightmare. It was just a complete nightmare. And so, for the past 6 days, I've been trying to figure out what's went wrong. And I spent most of that time tweaking. Does that work? Tweaking. Does that work? Phoning people. Does that work? I dug out every device known to humanity. I found my old first edition iPhone and all sorts of Blackberries and everything, and I've just been sitting going through every device known to humanity trying to fix this thing, and I couldn't do it, at least for a long time. And what the problem was, if you can imagine 3 drop downs, right? So select, state, and select city, and select blah 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 blah, right? And when you were clicking on the drop down, all sorts of things were going wrong. On some devices, it would let you pick the first drop down, and then you would click it, and then nothing would happen. The second one wouldn't load. You could press it, you could do anything. Sometimes the drop downs would not be activated at all, and you'd be like that over and over and over. I've been playing around with these old iPads and everything, and other times the page would just it had a wee spinner when it loaded up, and it was just basically freezing, and the wee spinner wasn't even spinning, but it was just staying on the page. And so there were a wide assortment of flaws with these drop downs, and it was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. And for a while, I was blaming Materialize. And I'm still not entirely sure. Well, Materialize played a part in this, but in fairness, it was not Materialize's fault. I think it was my fault. But for a long time, I was blaming Materialize because it was the drop downs and it was the Materialize framework, you know. And I spent ages and ages wrestling with this. I went through. I mean, when I close my eyes, I can see Stack Overflow, you know, and nobody had any solutions. I must have tried, without exaggeration, probably tried about 500 fixes over the last 6 days. So it's just like change that, no, change that, no, change that, no. And what would happen invariably would be that I'd have all of my devices set up here and I'd be going through them one by one by one by one, and I'd have like 4 devices working, and then the last one wouldn't work. And then I'd have to go back, fix that, and then suddenly this device is not working. And then I'd go back, and it was horrendous, to the point where I actually took a wee bit of a turn today. That's never happened in my life, but I was so short of sleep. I was just really dizzy, and I thought, I'm in real trouble. I'm going to take a break, you know. Anyway, eventually, I solved it, and I discovered what it was, and it was so simple, and you'll not believe what it was when I tell you. You will not believe it. So here's what was causing the problem. You know how in JavaScript, you can do something like, take everybody's favorite function, alert hello world, okay? Well, you can say alert, quotity quote quote, double quotes, look, they're doubles, right? And you can say hello world, or you can say alert, single quotes, hello world. You can also do things like template strings, for example. So you can say alert, and then you can do a wee backtick, hello world, backtick, and close that off, you know? So there are different ways of doing the same thing. What I discovered, it's such a simple mistake. What I discovered was 2 things. First of all, it turns out that lots of devices such as Blackberries and old iPads and my old laptop here, lots of older devices, and actually I think some iPhones, but I'm not sure, are very sensitive to the types of quotations that you use. For example, if you do an LI, right, a list item, and you say on click equals single quote, some function parenthesis single quote, right? That will work on Chrome. It will work on Safari. It will work on Internet Explorer. It will work on Android. It won't work on BlackBerry devices. I mean, who'd have guessed? It turns out that, you know how we assumed that it did not matter what type of quotes you use when you're doing HTML? So if you're doing an ID equals and then the thing. Turns out it really, really does matter. And if you're looking for full browser compatibility, you really want to use double quotations in those HTML tags as much as possible. As much as possible. There is an exception to that, which is if you do let's say a JavaScript function inside an HTML tag, and say you're passing in a name variable or something, and it's inside double quotes, then you can use single quotes and that'll work fine. But if you are the kind of person, and by the way, the thing that took me all of 6 days to figure out is that there are a lot of devices that don't even recognize template strings. They don't even try. It's like, forget that stuff, you know? So you see, okay, that's quotations, right? Draw a line under that, right? It was the quotation stuff was the main thing. But the other thing, which is a huge part of this, is that there's a hell of a lot of new JavaScript stuff coming out right now. There's a thing called Fetch API, for example. You've heard of this ES, is it, what are we on now, 16, 17? You've heard of double arrow functions and all of this new fancy stuff that's out with JavaScript. And I think that's fantastic. I've watched a lot of the Traverse videos where he builds these incredibly fancy JavaScript things such as image galleries and so on with a few lines of code, and I'm blown away. I mean, I think the guy is fantastic. To me, he is the guy who killed Bootstrap, and it's awesome. However, what I've discovered is, like, this is I can't remember. This is an iPad 2, but it came out straight away, so I don't know what year it is. It must be over 10 years old. Computer, stop. All right, 2011. So that's a 2011 device here. I can't even remember what I was talking about. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, here's the vibe, right? There are tons and tons of people who are using older devices, and for example, I've got a BlackBerry in there that I've been using, and it's pretty old. And these devices are not doing updates. They're not saying, hey, you need to update your browser or anything. So the JavaScript engines that they have got, talking about the older devices, they don't have all of that fancy new stuff. And if you chuck that stuff in, it's not going to work, and you're going to end up with a situation where you're pressing things and saying, why is nothing happening, like me? And it's just not good. And so one of the other things that I did that solved this problem that came up is basically I've committed myself to no longer I need to watch what I'm saying here. But I'm no longer going to be using any Angular of any description, Angular JS, Angular, anything like that. I'm also not going to be using any Vue.js. I'm not using any JavaScript front end whatsoever unless the client specifically asks for it. In which case, I'll do it, but I'll let them know. You do realize this may not work on some of the older devices. And so what I did during my 6 days of torture was I looked at all of the stuff that I usually would expect Angular to do. Things like fetching data from an API. Things like adding data to local storage, and all of the regular stuff that you would expect from a JavaScript front end engine. And one of the things that I did, and I've been meaning to do it for ages, one of the things I did is I basically looked at all of the pure JavaScript alternatives, because I thought, right, there's probably, if I'm entirely honest, there's probably only about 5 or 6 things that I really need a JavaScript framework to do. So I found all of those things one by one, and I found loads of different ways to do them, right? I mean, look at set timeout. There's like a gazillion ways of doing that, for example. Same with API calls. And I took really good notes, and I wrote down every method I could find. And then I tested each and every method on each and every device that I could find. And I have a lot of devices around here. I'm surrounded by devices, So I tested them all. And the findings were remarkable. What I discovered is that all of the new JavaScript stuff, anything that starts with ES, don't use it unless it's for an internal website. If it's a public front-facing website, don't use it unless the very rare exception is if the client specifically requests that. But don't use it. I actually feel like you'd be better off using Java or something like that, you know. All of the modern JavaScript stuff, all of it, everything that has appeared within the last 5 years of JavaScript, forget it. Don't use it ever. I will not use it. You should not use it. So, for example, if I'm doing an HTTP request now, I'm doing it the old-fashioned way. I'm doing it the old-fashioned Ajax way, you know, the kind of ugly way. But that way works on everything. It works across the board. And there's a lot of examples of stuff like that. Oh, and one of the other things I discovered, what a mind-blowing discovery this was. It turns out that jQuery, of all things, is really, really solid. Now, I've been like jQuery's biggest enemy for the past 2 or 3 years because it is a lot of code, it's kind of bloated and blah, 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 blah. Well, jQuery, all is forgiven. And what I discovered is that jQuery has... I should do a separate video about this. But jQuery has everything you need, and it works. And jQuery's a wee bit old now. It's been around the block a few times. However, that is to jQuery's credit. And no matter what you want to do a post request, use jQuery. You'd like to update an element on a page, use jQuery. You'd like to do some thing that adds little list items to something, use jQuery. jQuery is absolutely rock solid in ways that no JavaScript front-end framework can compete with, at least no modern framework. And you know what's funny? I should send this video to Steph Mischuk, and I think I will. I'm going to send him an email because I remember a couple of years ago, Steph Mischuk released a video discussing Angular, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, I don't really see the point of Angular because jQuery already does that stuff. In so many words, that's what he said. And I never said anything, but in my mind I was thinking, this guy is straight from the land of the Flintstones. Does he not realise that the Angular stuff lets you do tons of fancy things with a fraction of the code? Does he not realise that the Angular stuff is nice and modern and blah, 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 blah? Anyway, it turns out, I can't believe I'm saying it, Steph Mischuk was right. There is, like, if you gave me the choice between, look, I'll do whatever the client asks for. If it's somebody potentially asking for Angular right now, and that's fine. But if you had, take any JavaScript front-end engine that you can think of, any of the modern ones, React, Vue, anything you want, and if you gave me the choice between that and jQuery, I would go with jQuery every single time, because jQuery, whoever built it was a genius. It works on everything, you know? So that's amazing, and well done jQuery. And well done Steph Mischuk for making that call. Steph Mischuk's videos are very simple, you know. Sometimes his advice is a bit generic, but it's really solid advice, and I do give him credit for that. Finally, even though I'm praising jQuery in this video, personally, I'm going for pure old school JavaScript from now on. And even though what happened was a disaster, I walk away with my integrity intact, because, and not only that actually, but I am basically the browser compatibility expert of the universe. You tell me a device and I'll tell you if your JavaScript will work on it. I'll even tell you the flaws and everything. I think I'm not gonna tell you what I'm doing, but I'm going to do something, and something good will come of this, because the information I've learned is mind-blowing and it changes everything. Basically, people are building apps and using modern frameworks, and they're testing it on a laptop and on a new Android or an iPhone or whatever, and saying yay, or they're using one of those online browser mobile device simulators, and they're like yeah, when in actual fact a very, very significant percentage of visitors are not able to access the site. This is shocking, you know. So that's what happens. Now, as far as I go, this is a desperate time, because this company has lost revenue because of this. There's no question about it. And I'm gonna, as soon as I've finished patching up the site and relaunching it, and like, okay, there you go, now it works on anything, you know. But I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. They might get rid of me. They might decide to sue me and say we've lost money because of you and all of that stuff. And there's really no telling what's going to happen, you know. Whatever they do, I actually wouldn't blame them. But there's one thing that I want you guys to take away from this video, and it's what I always come back to, and that is integrity. You know, I was watching a Gordon Ramsay show just the other week. I love that show, you know. And there was this chef in it who was the worst chef on earth. He was awful. And his food, oh, I'm sick just thinking about it. His food was rotten. And you could see when he was cooking, he was putting his finger in and licking it. Oh, it was terrible. And his food was so bad, and the restaurant was falling apart. And Ramsay came in, and it was very obvious that it was the chef. The chef was the reason why the restaurant was failing. And every time Ramsay criticised the chef would be like this, just looking down. And then as soon as Ramsay turned his back, the chef would be saying, either to other people or even direct to the camera, the chef would say, I'm a great chef. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And the chef was in complete denial, you know. It was like, no matter what I was, you know, I'm a great chef. He's wrong. He's a mistake. He's wrong. And one of the problems in this life is that people don't take responsibility. And so at this stage, as I speak to you, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to, I don't even know if I'm going to be in the game, because this error has came at a really bad time, and it's a lot of damage has been done. But one thing I'll say is that at least I took responsibility. And at least I responded in the best way that I could. And as I wrap the site up, I don't know what's going to happen. But if there is any value in taking responsibility, you know, and I'm not blaming, by the way, the modern frameworks or anything like that. I'm not blaming Materialize, even though it looks like I bad-mouthed it here. The truth is that you can use things like Materialize as long as you watch out for the quotations and stuff. But I am responsible, and whatever happens, I will learn from this. And together, we will prosper.